Hello, and welcome back to the Check-in Chat podcast. We've checked into the pit stop, and now we're chatting all about the amazing race. And today it's season 1, episode 3, Home for Some. And this will be the last season 1 episode I'll recap for a while. Season 37 is about to begin, so I'll be moving on straight to that. But once that's all done, we'll be back to recap the rest of season 1. And today's episode, very interesting, a lot of Joe and Bill roaming about their old haunts, and that's why I provisionally wanted to call this episode One Night in Paris. For those who get the reference, you know, but instead I'm going to call it A Cat Amongst the Pigeons, because a cat really send one team home today, and we're going to get straight into a lot to cover, so let's go. We start off with last leg's winners, Pat and Brenda, who leave at 9:06 p.m. And just to note here, because this is like the early, first edition of the pit stop sign we see, and it has a clock on it. Oh, it's a white clock. I just want to note this, it's a small white clock. Just to point out here. So the teams are told they have to travel less than 2 miles to a big Ferris wheel, which is clearly in sight. But in their clue, they're only told to head to La Grande Rue, and the wheel closes at, I believe, 12:30. So at the beginning, they nearly misunderstand the outer operation, but they realise that it's still open, and so they ask for directions and take the subway. And Pat says that she thinks that they're doing great as a team, and even though there have been moments of friction, they think the Guidos are going to be tough all the way through the whole thing. We'll see, because there's going to be a point where they're near the back very soon. Talking about Jumbo, they're next to the part at 11:38 p.m. And they go on about living in Paris for 2 years, right? They have no idea what La Grande Rue is. I'm just saying, in that case, it might have been built after they stopped living in Paris, because that was 15 years before this. So who knows, it could have been after, but the fact that they should know what La Grande Rue is, at least one of them should know what it translates to. I expected better from them. And so Joe says that Bill is a take control sort of person, and on a lot of issues, Joe just lets Bill handle things. And so they talk to the police woman there nearby, and so they head on the train, just like Pat and Brenda. And then we see Rob and Brennan depart next at 12:11 a.m. And they sort of realise that they'll have to wait until morning to travel to the fair, so possibly. And Frank and Margarita are next to the part 7 minutes later. And they still sort of have their alliance going, so they work together about this. And Margarita realises very quickly, looking at the hours of operation, the wheel is still open, and they take their chance to go there. And so they go towards getting cabs, and Frank says he possesses certain strengths, more that's been physical, and Margarita is more cultured, and so her culture and grit with his physical strength makes a good combination. And while they're sort of whether to go to Le Grand Rue, Margarita asks Frank whether they should do the fast forward, but Frank says that's city stuff. Wait until they end up doing it later in the season. We then see Margarita, she starts to panic because them and Ron Brennan, they're trying to find taxis, and Ron Brennan get a taxi first, and so Margarita starts to panic a little bit. We then see Pat and Brenda, they get to the wheel first, and they get a detour, and the detour choice is easy walk or tough climb. In tough climb, teams will have to find Quasimodo's bell at the top of Notre Dame. Quasimodo's You Better Do! I had to do that one. I had to do the Quasimodo, I had to. And once they ring the bell, they get the next clue. But they have to climb the 297 steps to the top. In Easy Walk, teams will have to find a Foucault pendulum or Foucault. Foucault? My French is going to be terrible in this episode coming up. Let me tell you, it's not going to get any better. Now, it's the easier of two tasks because you can just walk to it. However, there are two different pendulums in Paris. One is at the Museum of Arts and Crafts, and the other, the one they need to find, is inside the Pantheon. And we know it's in the Pantheon because the clue is by the statue of a cat in the middle next to the pendulum. And so Pat and Brenda, they decide to choose Easy Walk here. And not long after, Joe and Bill get there and they decide to choose Easy Walk as well. Now, since the detours don't start until 10 a.m. in the morning, they decide to go visit their old haunt since they live there and go past their old house. Robin Brennan and Frank and Margarita just make it in time to the wheel. And they debate over which detour to choose since they have about a 9-hour wait. And Frank, he is not happy. So they're in the cab off to, I don't know where. They're sort of going to find information, coming back to the hotel. I don't know. But they're not happy because Frank felt that Robin Brennan didn't help them get a cab. But here's my thing was, so they're not helping you, and then if it was the other way around, and so they helped you, and you went off, they would be the ones pissed off. So you both had to get a taxi. It was struggling to get a taxi, and they just happened to get a taxi first. It just happened that way, and but Frank's pissed off because they didn't feel they helped them get a taxi. You know, when it's a taxi and you could tell it's busy and it's tough to get a taxi, it's everyone for themselves. Like, you can't both help get one taxi and then expect someone just left outside in the dust. So, Robin Brennan did the right thing there, and Frank just needs to get a life here. Joe and Bill, they pop into a hotel to ask, and the hotel manager tells them that it's at the Pantheon. So they're very excited about this, and their job's done for the night, so they decide to go wander around the shopping district. And Kevin and Drew are next to the part at 12:27, and they arrive at the wheel, and it had just closed 2 minutes ago. But they do ask one of the workers if other Americans were already there, and they say yes, the other teams were there. So they decide, because they don't know that is going to be a detour, they just think a possibility of a route marker. So they decide they could just be so behind having to wait till morning. They decide to go for the fast forward. And so in this fast forward, the teams will have to go to an obscure tea shop called Mariage Ferrez. I told you I'm not going to be good at French this week. Some of my pronunciations throughout all these episodes, a lot of them will be sketchy, so please bear with me. And when this is in Rive-Gauche, and they must ask for a specific tea called La Venture. And the fast forward in the tin, the tea tin, to claim the fast forward. Paul and Amy are next to depart just under 2 hours later after Kevin and Drew at 2:18 a.m. and they just bicker over how to get to the wheel. Amy saying is that the stress of all, because we know there have been high tensions between them. So she says the stress just drives you batty, and you're in foreign countries and you don't know where you're going and you don't know where you are. And Paul's saying that they do bicker, but there's been so many other issues and stress factors to focus on that they've just like not focused on that they've been bickering, and he thinks they've been pulling together really well. Yeah, that's not going to last long, especially next week. Let me tell you. We then see Nancy and Emily. They leave 5 minutes after Paul and Amy. So Emily is talking here about um, Nancy, and she's saying that Nancy was someone who didn't want Emily to ride a bike on the street, and now she's letting her jump off cliffs, and she's letting her do it, and so she feels like she's getting closer to Nancy here. We then see Dave and Margaretta. They're next to the bar in 8th at 2:46 a.m. And the reason all behind why, of course, they checked in 6th last leg, and they were given an unspecified time penalty because what happened, and we didn't see this. Now, I wondered, we didn't see much of Dave and Margaretta in the last leg. And so what happened was they arrived at the Eiffel Tower. They both went up to the second floor to try and find the clue. Paul, I believe, tells Margaretta the answer, not knowing that they haven't found the clue yet. So Paul tells them it's Arc de Triomphe. So Dave and Margaretta, they go back down the elevator, and they then find the roadblock clue. So because they didn't fully fulfill the requirements of the roadblock, in which that Dave would have had to climb up the stairs and climb back down. If he would have done that, they would have still passed the requirement. But because they didn't do that, they got a time penalty. So they lead the Arc de Triomphe, and they asked some Parisian women where it is, and Margaretta says the age is just a piece of paper, and it's something up here, and she only feels her age when she looks in the mirror, and it almost does her in. I love Margaretta. She has the best outlook on life. We then have Dave. He says that in 40 years of living with Margaretta, he's seen her tackle a lot of different things, and when she decides to do something, she does well at it. I love how much Dave loves Margaretta. We're going to see more of it next week in the next episode. Like, oh, it touches my heart. We then see Lenny and Karen there, the last part at 3:03 a.m. And Lenny says that he's a competitive person, but doesn't think he's 100% right now, and that he can do better. I think what's keeping him down is his partner just being negative to him all the time. So we then see Paul and Amy, and they arrive at the wheel, and they decide to wait outside. And while they wait, we see Kevin and Drew. They arrive at the tea shop, and they camp outside, right outside the doors. We then have Jumbo. They're having a wonderful time, and like reminiscing, and they're revealing that they came to Paris for business in 1984 and stayed there for 2 years, and they've been meaning to come back, and so they're just having a wonderful time. We then see Lenny and Karen and Dave and Margaretta. Dave join Paul and Amy as well, and they all camp outside in sleeping bags. And Margaretta says that it was going well, and then it started to rain, and so then they had like foil blankets to protect them from the rain, the cold rain, and some umbrellas as well. And then we see Jumbo to get out of the rain. They just go to a tea shop and living life. We then see Frank and Margarita, and they have found out that from a local that the pendulum is at the Pantheon, and so they go and they're about to reach the Pantheon, and as they're walking up to it, Robin Brennan turn up, and Margarita, she says, "Oh, fooled again, oh," and so they both decide to talk tactics, and they think Jumbo will do the easy walk as well, and all the other teams will do tough climb because the Notre Dame is more recognizable and they'll be able to just go there easily. So the next morning, we see that Pat and Brenda have arrived at the Museum of Arts and Crafts, thinking that the pendulum is the pendulum is there, but thinking it's the right one. And we see at the wheel Dave and Margareta, Lenny and Kevin, and Paul and Amy. They're trying to warm themselves up from the cold. And Karen says that they've agreed that they're different in a lot of ways, and he knows that he's a warrior and that he's more laid back, and they've sort of leveled each other out. And Margareta, once again, another positive outlook for Margareta, says, I want our kids to know that we can do this and that their grandkids will have the same love of adventure that they do and just get out there and go and do it. She is such a positive outlook. I love Margareta. We then switch over to Kevin and Drew. They've woken up at the fast forward and they're complaining that they're hungry and they're complaining about the rain. And talking about after effects of the rain, we see at the wheel Nancy and Emily turn up and they're shocked to see that all the other teams have slept out in the rain during the night when Nancy and Emily, they went back to the hotel and they all get the detour glue and they all choose to do tough climb. So we then switch over to the fast forward and Drew says that Paris is not special, comparing that to being in Soho, which Soho is fancy from what I understand, but I've never been there. But if it's like in New York, Soho I take as fancy. And that's just me. And that's just from looking at pictures. So they go in, they get the fast forward, and they're told that the pit stop is top of the Chateau Le Beau in Le Beau de Provence in the south of France. And they take the train to get to the south of France. We then get Joe and Bill. We see them taking the subway to the Pantheon. And out the Pantheon, Ron, Ben, and Frank and Margarita, they're there. And they notice a sign which talks about the tariffs, and it says the entry is 42 francs. But francs. I feel my age now. Francs. Oh, I forgot to mention that last episode. But Margarita notices that it's the student entry price. And I think that relieves them very quickly. While at the Museum of Arts and Crafts, Pat and Brenda go in. They find the pendulum, but not the cat. So they don't know what's going on. And the other back 4 teams, they finally arrive at Notre Dame. While Joe and Bill finally get to the Pantheon, they are not happy to see Rob and Brennan and Frank and Margarita there. And Rob says that Team Guido, they tried to hold other people back with deceit and trickery, and it's just not a good way to play the game. And Joe and Bill, they taunt the other man, Rob, Brennan, and Frank here for not going for the more physical detour. So they decide to walk into the Pantheon. Now, this is where the drama starts again. So they walk into the Pantheon and decide to walk in the order that they arrive. So Frank and Margarita, Ron Brennan, and then Joe and Bill. And so they walk, Frank and Margarita and Robin Brennan, they walk past the gate that you go into to the pendulum until one of the guards goes, hey, over here. And Joe and Bill just happen to be like right there. And so they go in to get the clue first. And the other 2 teams, they are pissed. They are pissed off at Joe and Bill because they were like, oh, we were supposed to get the clue first because we walked in there first. That was the agreement. But no, you walked past the gate. The guard helped, and it just happened Joe and Bill was there. Not their fault that you walked past it. You know, they were too focused on just trying to get away from Joe and Bill. And so Joe and Bill read the next clue and instructed them to find the man in a blue suit across from the Hotel de Ville. And Joe says, trying to intimidate them, and that he has taken a certain attitude when you try to be friendly. And this is the whole, friends, like, it's not like best friend race, it's like being friendly. And then we go back to Pat and Bender, and they're still looking for the cat. And one of the curators at the museum overhears and tells them, "There's another pendulum. You're at the wrong place. The cat's not here." And so they head to the Pantheon, and while at Notre Paul and Amy, they take a head start here. And that's Emily, Lenny, Karen, right behind them. Dave and Margareta. They take their time up there, but they're doing well to keep up with the group. And one by one, they ring the bell. We then go back to the Pantheon where we see Pat and Bella. They finally find the cat, and Pat hugs the cat in relief. And they go to find the Hotel de Ville, and they go to and take the subway to get there. Well, Joe and Bill, they've decided to walk to the Pantheon here, as they felt that the traffic is likely to go slow them down if they take a cab. We then see that Paul and Amy and Lenny and Karen are the first two teams to find the man in the blue suit. I don't think they realise that they're currently at the top of the pack, so they're not as hyped. But if they knew, I think they'd be ecstatic right now. And so it's a roadblock. It's a dirty job, but someone's got to do it. And the chosen team member must dress up in a sanitary suit. Not sanitary suit. I'm not a maxi pad. And walk underground through the sewers of Paris to find the uh, Place de Châteaulet, where they'll find the next clue, and it's roughly about 2 blocks away. And so Dave, Frank, Joe, Karen, Emily, Pat, Paul, and Rob are doing this roadblock. And Nancy and Emily get there next, and Joe and Bill are just lost. And we see then Frank and Margarita get there, and Joe and Bill still trying to find out where to go. I think they're across the street, and then Rob and Brennan are pop up right next to them, and they dash across the street, and we see this big team bunch up. This is the first time we've seen nearly all the teams at the same time. It's anyone's game here. And while Emily goes into the series, Nancy looked quite happy and excited that Emily was the one to leave us. And Paul gets the clue first, followed by Karen. Now, I don't know if this was a rule break here, because Karen opens the clue before she reunites with Lenny. I don't know if you class that as a rule break. I want your opinion on that. So the clue tells them that they need to make their way to the Chateau de Beau, and Paul and Amy and Lenny can they go to the train station to find out information, and Joe and Bill they take the subway to the train station here. All the other teams they did a bit of a montage, and all like it wasn't a special roadblock. Like everyone was fine, but so full recap sees the team standings here, and Kevin and Drew are coming first with the fast forward. Paul and Amy, Lenny and Karen, and Nancy and Emily are next, followed by Frank and Margarita and Rob and Brennan there in the middle of the pack, with Joe and Bill, Dave and Margareta, and Pat and Brenda in the last 3 spaces, and at risk of elimination at the moment. We see Kevin and Drew here, they disembark from the train, and they head up to the pit stop and they check in. And Pat and Brenda, we see them getting to spot the man in the blue suit, and they find the clue, they do the roadblock, they're fine. We then see Joe, they're on the subway, Joe and Bell, and Joe's very upset being at the back of the pack. And Lenny and Karen and Paul and Amy now realise they're in the top, and so they congratulate each other. And Frank and Margarita are trying to get train tickets, and Frank's trying to tell Margarita to relax, but does it by shouting it to her. I get it, he's stressed as well, but dude, You, is this supposed to be your wife? Turn it down. We then see Bill saying, in Paris, they got a lot of confidence and a bit complacent. And when they realized that they were near the back, it snapped them back into reality very quickly. So Joe and Bill have a strategy here. Basically, Nancy and Emily, Lenny and Cameron, and Paul and Amy, they refer to them as sort of the weaker teams, and Joe and Bill think they refer themselves as the underdog teams. So they sort of want to use an advantage and help them find the train. And that all 14s are walking down the train platform looking for the second class train carriages. And so Joe and Bill realise that they're passing the second class cars and decide to ditch other teams and go the other way. And then the other teams, they attempt to look for them, but they can't find them. But they ended up getting onto the train correctly. But with the help of a porter on the train. And Amy and Emily are pissed off that Joe and Bill ditched them. And Paul says that they just can't be trusted. We then see also Frank and Marguerite and Ron Brennan board the train, and Bill notices this, and this upsets Joe. And Nancy comments that she thinks someone didn't make the train, and it's Dave and Margareta. They're still going through the clue at the train station, and I don't think also they've realised. I don't think they've realised that Pat and Brenda have lost so far behind there, because I think because Pat and Brenda were there first, left first, and got the detour clue first, I don't think they've compared and noticed that Pat and Brenda are missing. We see that then on the third train, we see Dave and Margareta and Pat and Brenda. They get on their train, and then this is where Phil explains what's happening next. Because as teams are on the train, he tells us that the tourists get off at Marseille and then take a cab up to Le Beau, whereas the locals know to get off at Avignon and then take a cab to Le Beau, and this will save them an hour in travel. So Joe and Bill get off the train first, and some other teams are wondering why they've gotten off. And even though the tickets say go to Marseille, and so we then find out that Frank and Margarita and Robin Brennan, they also got off the train, and this confuses Nancy and Emily, Lenny, Cameron, Paul, and Amy even more. And they all decide to stay on the train because their tickets say to go to Marseille, and so they do. And so all three teams who got off early get into their taxis, and we find out that Robin Brennan found out that they found a shortcut from a Frenchman who was from the province, and they then shared it with Frank and Margarita because they felt they're still in alliance together. But Frank and Margarita say that they don't trust Von Brennan and think they're fake. And so then we find out Dave and Margareta, they get off at Avignon, taking the shortcut, and we see it feels like one of the locals on the train told them about it and was telling them where to go. So we then see Frank and Margarita finishing second, Ron Brennan third, Joe and Bill fourth. And then at Marseille, we see Lenny, Karen, Nancy, and Emily, and Paul and Amy. They got off the train and they get in the taxis. Dave and Margareta place in fifth. And as they come up, because they have to also trek from the bottom all the way to the very top of the province. And production had this jib camera set up here. They got hold of a jib and they're like, we're using this jib we're going to use it. We've hired it out, so we're going to use it for every opportunity it is worth. Let me tell you, and they did. They used it for a lot of sweeping shots here. And so Dave and Margareta, they finish in fifth, and they share a kiss, a celebratory kiss. Oh, I love them. Paul and Amy come sixth, Lenny and Karen in seventh, and Nancy and Emily in eighth. The underdogs, they celebrate that none of them are eliminated. And then Pat and Brendan, they get off at Marseille, and they arrive. They're praying they're not in last place. And as they reach the Chateau de Beau, the Grim Reaper Phil meets them and tells them that they've been eliminated. And they're gutted. Oh, ladies. They share with Phil that, you know, their mistake. This leg was just going to the wrong pendulum. And how did they, like, how were they supposed to know there was two pendulums? But they're grateful for the trip, even though it's short, that they loved the experience. And very shortly, I will be eulogizing Pat and Brenda's time in the race. But it's time for I'll do it my way, where I decide what I would do if I was on the race. And so the first choice was, of course, the detour. I would have chosen Tough Climb. I think, 297 steps. I think it's nothing. I'm a stairs person, so I would have felt it was nothing. And like trying to find like a place, like a pendulum that's a bit, I would find a bit obscure, when it's like you go to a tough climb, it's easy, straightforward, you know what to do, you can get in and out. And in what ends up being with some of the teams, they got ahead for a moment versus the tough climb, so well done to them. So I would have gone with tough climb. But then the roadblock, if my late fiance was my partner, I would have happily done this roadblock. I'm fine with going to sewers. Like, so I would have been fine with that. I would discussed it in my head, but I would have done this roadblock. And it depends how, like, what locals are available to find out the information. I don't know whether I would have able to get the shortcut. I'm someone who does like to get off like at different train stations if it is a shortcut. I'm someone who does that. So dependent on like who was there, I would have loved to see if I was able to find out that information. So that was it for this episode. It was a very interesting episode with uh, team change places quite frequently when teams came together from two different sides of the detour, because 4 teams chose one side of the detour and 4 teams chose the other side of the detour, which I did mention because that's the first time this series that it was evenly split. People people not just taking one side of the detour. Both sides of the detour were optimized here. And so it is now time to eulogize Pat and Brenda in a segment I call We Were Rooting for You. We were all rooting for you. And we will do that right after this. Hey, fellow race fans. I know you are the same as me and love talking about Amazing Race. And if you want to get something off your chest or want to ask any Amazing Race question, no matter what it is, you can send me it in the comments or send me an email at checkinchatpodcast@gmail.com and I might answer it in a future podcast. It's time for We Were Rooting for You. We were all rooting for you. This is the segment of the show where I eulogize the eliminated team, and this week it's Pat and Brenda. Oh. And it was just the mistake that they went to the wrong pendulum. They didn't know they went to the wrong pendulum, and that wasted time there, and that just led them to being behind, and it got them eliminated. While all the other teams, like the back teams who would call themselves the underdogs, they went to a tough climb and sort of all did that pretty quickly. And I think if they sort of did the tough climb, they might have stayed. But because they ended up getting the train with Dave and Margareta and then staying to Marseille, they didn't know the shortcut to Avignon. And it did send them home. And they were nice, they were lovely, and they really enjoyed the adventure and being there. And it's just a shame the way they went out. They weren't, even though they sort of weren't explicitly having an alliance with any of the teams, they were very fan and teams I think would have willingly gone and helped them. They were the first team to be eliminated after taking fast forward and being first in the previous leg as well, which, you know, it's happening. We're going to see it over the future seasons, but I am so gutted to see them go this early because they generally loved being there and had a really good experience. I'm going to miss them in the race. Would they have lasted? They might have lasted a few more legs if they kept the pace up, but I don't think that they would have lasted more than a few more legs. And would they have? Could they have won? No, I don't think so. I think like the top teams like Joan Bull, Frank Margarita, and Ron Brennan, especially times, were just so powerful that I don't think they would have been able to catch up there. So that was just unfortunate, but they had an amazing time in the race, and it's sad to see them go. And then there were 8 teams. So that is it for this week's edition of the podcast. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I'm going to take a little pause on season 1. We're going to come back to it in a few months after season 37 has wrapped, because that is starting this coming week. And so next weekend, you are going to get my first season 37 podcast, where I review the premiere episode, including this start the season of surprises and the fork in the road, which will lead to a double elimination. And it will also be an extended edition of the podcast because it's the premiere, and I'll be doing my biohazard report, which I'm about to record right now. So a few days later, it's authentic before the season started, so I won't have any spoilers on that. But if you do want to send me any feedback, anything Amazing Race related, whether it's a question you want me to answer or something you want me to discuss, send to me either in the comments, or if you're listening on the audio podcast, send it over to me at checkinchatpodcast@gmail.com. So thank you all so much for listening, and I'll see you all next week. Goodbye.